So, welcome back to my podcast, man. So, in this episode, I want to discuss players that cause rule changes throughout the NFL's history. There's been many dominant players throughout any sports history, but obviously this is a football podcast, so I'm going to be talking about some of the most dominant players that have caused rule changes. Not even just most dominant players, but it's usually the dominant players or the players who have a specific style that cause rule changes. So, throughout the NFL's history, there have been plenty of alterations to the rules. These changes are usually made usually to make the game safer and fair. So, the first rule change I'll be getting into involves the horse collar tackle. Now, me personally, I'm no stranger, the horse collar tackles, and I firmly believe that it is one of the most dangerous plays in sports. Let me tell you why. It's simply because it leaves your body vulnerable, it causes injuries, and it puts stress on your back and neck. So, a horse collar tackle is when somebody violently grabs and pulls the back of another player's shoulder pads in order to pull his feet from beneath him. And I should have a video or a picture of what a horse collar tackle looks like on the screen. This is low-key a little reminder to myself to put that up there when I play this back. But so basically they yank your you run at full speed, accelerating, and they yank your body back suddenly. And you can see why that'd be a problem. Like any sudden movement can cause injury, season-ending injury at that. So yeah, and you can see why that'd be a problem. But the player that enforced this rule was Roy Williams. He used to use this tackle all the time, and he caused 3 to 4 season-ending injuries to other players in 1 year, and that's why the NFL decided to implement this rule. But the fact that it was ever deemed okay is ridiculous. For one, it's not really. I get football as a brutal game and everything, but it's not really, the most manly way to tackle somebody. The fact that you have to use that tactic in the first place is kind of soft to me, but that's just opinion. That's just an opinion. But yeah, so the next hold on, give me a second. Okay. So that rule is a 15-yard penalty now, and it's a 15-yard penalty and automatic first down. So yeah. And the second rule I want to get into is the 5-yard bump rule. So this rule, it was put into effect to help the offense have a better chance of making plays. And the rule limits the defense's ability to be physical with the receiver within the 5-yard margin. So basically, the defender can only be physical and put hands on the receiver within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. And after that, it's so limited. The receiver really has all the leeway in the world, and that's why being a corner is one of the hardest jobs in the game, because they can't be as physical as back before the rule was implemented, all the way down the field during the whole route, which makes it fair, but it kind of balances the favor to the wide receiver. So yeah, this rule is this is definitely more of an offensive rule. And, the NFL, at this time, the NFL was hoping to transition into more of a passing league so that the game would become safer, and this rule would help with that. So, in order for, the league to become more of a passing league, they needed to make it easier for receivers to get open so that quarterbacks can easily get them the ball. So, that was another reason why, this rule went into effect. And Mel Blount, a vicious parole corner on the Pittsburgh Steelers steel curtain defense. If you don't know about the steel curtain defense, you should go research them. They're one of the best defenses of all time. But yeah, and Mel Blount, the player who enforced this rule change, was a part of it, a part of that defense. So and the next rule is let me get into involves quarterbacks. So as most people know, as most football fans know, the NFL is centered around quarterbacks. They make the most money, they sell the most tickets, and they're the most protected players on the field. And this is fair to a certain extent since they have to know more than any other position. So the quarterback has to know every other player's They have to know. They have to be able to read defenses. Has to be able to recognize fake defenses. They have to know what every offensive player is doing and tell them if they need help. So it's fair that the quarterbacks get the treatment and recognition that they do because they have to be the smartest players on the field. But since they have such a high football IQ, in addition to a great skill set, finding a great NFL level quarterback is difficult. You see a lot of guys that are successful in college, but don't have the same success in the NFL because it's a whole different level. That's why everybody don't make it to the NFL. As much as they want to say such a small percentage of people make it to high school, well, that percentage is even smaller in the NFL. And I feel like some people really don't realize how hard it is to be that great. Like to even be good or decent is hard, but to be as great as a Tom Brady or Joe Montana is, it's slim to none. It's almost impossible for most guys, and people don't really realize how hard it is. But yeah, these realities, bring me into the rule change about the quarterback. So the rule change about the quarterbacks, you cannot hit quarterbacks below the knees. So if you watch games, you'll constantly see players tackling players lower halves. So coaches will teach players to hit the running backs' knees or ankles, but with quarterbacks, that's not allowed, And this is partly because the quarterbacks are in a stationary position when getting ready to throw a pass. So it's more likely that they'll get injured. When you're in that stationary position, you can't fight force with force. So it's just like, let's say they tack you below your knees. Now you getting hit with a force going in our direction. It's just, there's no balance in force. So it's more likely that you get injured. And this rule was put into effect after Carson Palmer was hit below the knee on the first play of a playoff game, and it resulted in his ACL being torn and him missing a full year. And the preservation of revenue is probably the main reason this rule went into effect, because quarterbacks are the main attraction in the NFL. So the less they're hurt, the more money the NFL will bring in. So that's one of the main reasons why this rule was put into effect. And the next rule I'm going to get into involves hair, which is kind of absurd to talk about football. Like hair, football, kind of doesn't seem like a match, but it does. So this rule says that the hair is an extension. No, this rule is called the hair is an extension of the uniform rule. And it's one that I feel needs to be revised, especially when I had longer hair and dreads. I really thought it should be revised. So, and that wasn't one of the reasons why I cut it off, but now that I think and look back on it, I'm glad that I cut my dreads off, because if somebody were to pull my hair on the football field, it would be a problem. But yeah, this rule basically says that it's legal for a player to tackle a player by the hair. It usually only happens to players with dreadlocks or other types of long hair. Otherwise, you can't pull their hair because it's not long enough. But the problem with this is that there have been occasions where players have had their hair pulled out because of this. Like, there's a running back named D'Angelo Hall. He was tackled by his hair. And the player who tackled him, he had gloves on. So 3 of his dreads came out with it. 3 of his dreads came out with, he tackled him and pulled out 3 of his dreads and then tried to hand it back to him. Like, that's just utterly ridiculous. I mean, he ended up getting them sewn back in, but that's still an obvious problem. I don't think that that hair should be an extension of the uniform. That's another soft way to go about the game, So, and then additionally, this is similar to a horse collar tackle because of how violent and sudden it pulls the player's head and body back. So I really think that the NFL should look at this rule and make some revisions. But Ricky Williams, with his style of dreads, he really popularized players getting dreads and then long hairstyles. So he's the reason why this rule was put into effect. He was the first one. And debatably, one of the most dangerous plays in football is a blindside block. Now, if this is when a player hits another player who is not looking at them, or in a direction, or when a player hits a player in a direction away from the action of play. So, I'll definitely have a video on screen of what a blindside block is. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. It can be pretty vicious. Now, people love violent hits, so like if you really love football, you might love to watch it, but it can get pretty vicious, and it's just when you really think about what it can do to a body, you just like, man, yeah, this needed to get looked at. It needed to be thrown away. So during a blindside block, players are left defenseless, and they're being hit at a very high speed and with a lot of impact force. So, this can definitely cause and lead to massive head trauma and can definitely result in injury. This can be, hits like these can cause season-ending and career-ending injuries. And in the case of Hines Ward, the player who had this rule implemented and looked into, he before his time, blindside hits were legal for a long time. But after he broke another player's jaw and ended their whole season, the NFL said, "Oh yeah, it's time to look into this and see what needs to be done. We can't have guys being held and hit defenseless, and we're losing money because our top players are out of the game now." So, a lot of things, NFL rule changes come down to money and things like that. And that's why some of the rule changes are stupid. But in the case of the ones on this list, mostly it's not. So after that season, when Hines Ward broke the other player's jaw, in the 31-1 vote, deemed it to be against the rule. So in the 31-1 vote, they said that blindside hits were illegal now. And the one vote that was against it came from Hines Ward's team, the Steelers. It's pretty ironic there, but yeah. So, like I was saying about the a lot of the rules having to do with revenue and NFL keeping money, that's part of the celebration rules. Like not the celebration rules, the equipment rules. Like NFL players can't wear certain cleats and certain headbands or accessories. Like Odell Beckham, he wore some Louis Vuitton cleats and he got fined because the NFL only wants you to wear certain things, which is utterly ridiculous. Like, we, as football players, they've worked so hard to get to the NFL, and you telling them they can't wear whatever they want to because you want them to wear NFL brand or NFL sponsored brand or whatever. Like, this is not like some people say it's a privilege to be in the NFL. This is not a privilege because they were the ones out working hard on a Sunday night when nobody was there, when nobody believed in them. They were the ones who got themselves there. In addition, to help with other people, and they were given the opportunity, but they put in the work. So it's just utterly ridiculous that the NFL can restrict them in what they can wear. And even worse than that are the new taunting rules. Like, you can't even really show emotion after making a play. Like, a former NFL player said it best. He said that there's no way he can sit and watch hours of film for a week and weeks. He's sitting there watching film for hours, for days upon days. And then he gets to the game and perfects this one play. The one play that he's been waiting on, he perfects it in game. There's no way that he can sit there and show no emotion. And that's what the NFL wants you to do now. They're taking the fun out of the game. The fans love seeing that emotion. They love seeing that emotional display because you really kind of get an insight to how a player is, and you kind of see everything that they've been sitting there waiting for and dreaming about and daydreaming about. You see it all come out in that one play. And you have people trying to tell them that, oh, no, that's not acceptable. We're going to fine you because of that. We're going to take some of your money away because you spent all this time and you spent all this time and trying to figure out certain things and read the defense and read the offense to make sure you make this one play. So we're going to take your money away just because you showed your emotion. Like, it's really just utterly ridiculous. So some things the NFL does as far as rule changes is amazing, and it helps the game progress and be safer so that the next generation can keep playing it or whatever. But some things are just utterly ridiculous, and it has no place being a rule. It just has no place. It has no place really being emphasized and talked about. There should just be disbanded. So, that's my opinion on some of the rule changes. But all in all, those are some of the most influential players that cause rule changes and things like that. So, yeah, that's the end of my podcast, and I want to thank whoever tuned in, man. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you tuning in, man. So, yeah, thank you.